Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's the Jacked Up Review Show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show.
And I'm here with another special episode, two-parter, where I have guests on to discuss the overall James Bond franchise. And while we're recording this, of course, Daniel Craig's final Bond isn't out, but that's okay. We're just looking at the whole overall saga as a whole. Just we're going to review by era. We're going to review everyone's favorite, Bond actor, as well as Bond girl, Bond villain, Bond, plot. Here to do that with us is Sanders, Marc Sanders himself, MMM at the movies. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How you doing, Cam?
Very good. We're both members of the Widescreen podcast Facebook group, and I just sent out the invite just saying let's tackle the highs and lows of James Bond and why this never ending yet lasting in popularity franchise that not only has just shattered box office records but has just become one of the best reviewed spy franchises of all time. Why has it just lasted so long, aside from just the book connection, having various video game spin-offs, and more or less just inspiring other subgenres in this thing we call movies.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to believe James Bond goes all the way back to, at least in film, to 1962.
Yeah.
And then Ian Fleming, the creator, he was writing a whole series of books before the first film ever came out, Dr. No, with the one and only Sean Connery. So,
yes.
but of course,
Trebek. Just can't help ourselves. But so how did you get into it? Like my father and uncle were always watching these, and it helped that in the early 2000s throughout, I mean, AMC and Spike TV were the main deals, but as they went on, Sci-Fi Channel and other places started showing them more often, based on whoever had the contracts, whatever year. Usually it would be, someone gets them for Thanksgiving and the other channel gets them throughout the summer.
yeah.
How about you?
Well, in 1977, The Spy Who Loved Me was the first James Bond movie that I saw in theaters. It's actually my favorite movie-going anecdote. I was 5 years old, and my dad was a diehard James Bond fan. And
Nice.
I'm 5 years old, never heard of James Bond, much less, I think the only heroes I knew of were Superman and Batman from the Super Friends Saturday morning cartoon, something like that.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
So in a way, James Bond was your big screen Batman.
Yeah, there you go. And my brother, I remember, was at sleepaway camp, and I'm 5 years old, and my mom and dad were living in New Jersey. Mom and dad took me with them to a dinner party. And after we left the dinner party, we're driving up Route 4 in Paramus, New Jersey, and it's near midnight. And Dad says, "Linda, let's go to the movies. Let's go see James Bond." And my mom protested, and my dad just basically said, with deep affection, absolutely, he said, "Shut up, Linda. Come on, let's go." and we went to the movies to a midnight showing of The Spy Who Loved Me.
Oh,
And
Jesus.
Mom covered my eyes anytime the villain Jaws appeared and bared his teeth. Mom covered my eyes because she's afraid I'd get nightmares. But it was thrilling. It really was. It was an absolute thrill. And that opening where he skis right off the mountain and parachutes down, it's spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. It still is.
That one is definitely one of the first ones I saw on TV, like, or parts of it. I just would always remember the end where he's confronted the main bad guy, who's of course, been in Beverly Hills Cop and everything else, but he just spears him, shoots him under the table for one of the
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so
it's just outrageous. It's like, fucking God.
And because it's James Bond, he shoots him under the table, so he gets him right in the crotch because this is James Bond. And
he doesn't even show up, but you know what happened.
But he basically castrated him. But James Bond, he's the womanizer and everything, and there was always that sexual innuendo about him that Fleming was proud of. And
it's pretty much as close as he got to.
They were all proud of it. It's kind of diverted from that with the Daniel Craig movies. I think that's okay. But
that's fine. I mean, what was it? It is like the last one. He comes up behind Monica Bellucci and he's like, what's going on.
Of course. But they've become a little bit more PC. Probably the last one, Spectre, was pre-Me Too movement still, but it was, they've been more PC, and I think the cool thing, what keeps the franchise going, is the fact that the series is always reinventing itself and responding to the world climate, the worldwide climate of what's going on and what's trending.
Worldwide climate. Even though the producers are always just admitting that they're not taking different styles, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Moonraker was a take at James Bond. Or not, I mean Star Wars, but Live and Let Die. It might as well.
Exploitation.
Absolutely, it might as well. And around that same time as Shaft in Africa, so it's pretty funny how they're doing that. Yeah. And on record, they said, "Oh, we're going with the Jason Bourne movies as our influence." When they did Craig's era, but then a lot of people are noting how Skyfall kind of was similar to Taken and Live Free or Die Hard, and of course they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, come on, you even stole the same Istanbul shot. But
at the end of the day, it's still James Bond.
It is still James Bond. That is true. And even though it might not, everyone's got their different take on what they think does or doesn't feel. It's interesting how we bring it up to that, because I see how this shares so many of the same crews with like you look at Brosnan, Moore's era, like anyone who was on Moore's films were pretty much on some of the same Men on a Mission type movies that coincidentally he ended up in. Brosnan, some of those are like launching so many just A-list British directors at the time, like Roger Spottiswoode and Martin Campbell. And then, Craig's pretty much, you look at the crews of all his movies, especially the second unit directors and stunt crews. That you pretty much they've all been on like the Expendables, Bournes, Christopher Nolan, Batman's, and it's just like, go figure.
Yeah, and look, you go with what works. You go with experience, and
you really do.
And you go with what works, and I think Craig owns the movies quite well. I think he's set himself aside.
He's definitely the driving force.
The prior Bond actors. So I like the Daniel Craig movies, but they're definitely not like Goldfinger or From Russia with Love. But,
and how could they be? I mean, everyone likes to do the whole. It's not the same and all that. Is like, well, it's not going to be the same. It wasn't made in the same era. So if you got to just be very, very deep when you're going into stuff like this. You got to say, I prefer this because of this. It's like, okay. Gotcha. Because, I mean, Vic Armstrong, a stunt coordinator who's on the James Bond-inspired Indiana Jones, franchise, admitted that they went pretty diehard on like the last few Brosnan films. It's like, they kind of were kind of the answer at that time to every Hollywood blockbuster. We can we can pimp it out way better than you guys.
And
Hollywood's doing.
and just my opinion, but even with like say the last two Brosnan films, The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day, they maybe were losing themselves in the stories a little bit, and they were just going for the big extravaganza explosions and nothing else.
There's
Especially
that. Yeah.
especially Die Another Day.
Oh God, that.
They were going really sci-fi gonzo on that movie.
Yeah, pretty Matrix. Everything's got to have electronic music playing. And it's like,
Yep.
what the hell? And it's a
Yep.
shame because Brosnan is one of the two actors, along with Craig, who donates his persona to a video game. And you look at Everything or Nothing, it's like, that is a great video game where everyone, before they were doing motion capture, everyone has personas. They look exactly like how they look in real life. And
Yeah.
it's like they had William Dafoe as like the next, as the student, Christopher Walken's Max Zorn from Roger Moore era. And
Oh, really?
You play Brosnan's character, Bond, fighting John.
I lost you, Cam. Yeah.
Yeah, you hear me now? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I got
Brosnan fights Jaws in that same James Bond game, and so that was cool. It's like, okay, you're crossing over to the multi-generations. That's pretty cool. And it's like, it's a shame that they just weren't as clever with those movies. So I think right now everyone's been joking how the new Mission Impossibles with Tom Cruise and which also kind of had a identity conflict when it first started out, Kingsman feel more James Bond than the new Bonds. And I think that's just because in this day and age they're going more for just like the darkness of what Bond novels are than they are the actual plots. The plots are just always a mixed bag because they've just had so many different talents each go around. So I think that's the main issue, is everyone has their preference. Some of them want goofy, some of them want serious, some of them want a bit of both. So let's start with Connery's era. I think again, this is the one where it's popular to just say this is the classic era, but I think that's more than just subjective. I think you got to just embrace all the eras and see which, because there's keepers and there's losers in each one.
Right.
So I mean,
well, with the Connery era, we mentioned together that as the movies go through time since the early 60s to present day, they kind of respond to what's going on in the world. And with the Connery era, they were taking advantage of a lot of Fleming's approach and incorporating the Cold War into it. That's what he was using to his advantage to bring about the storylines. The humor of it came from the fact that Connery was just so casual with anything. Most heroes, you could have John McClane in Die Hard, and after he finishes a fist fight or a shootout with a bunch of terrorists, he's out of breath and he's sweating like crazy and everything. But
absolutely,
Connery,
Alan Rickman's,
but Connery, he'll get into a brawl with a guy or something like that, and he'll finish the guy off, and then he's just very casual about it. Then he beds the woman. Then he takes the girl and beds the woman, and it's like,
oh yeah,
I don't need to breathe heavy over this. A guy tried to kill me. It's all in a day's work, and that's where the humor came from. But the plot lines were very, very responsive to the Cold War, especially something like From Russia with Love.
Oh yeah, just with the boot kick and the knife emerging from the shoe. That's a total,
Yeah, but even the MacGuffin that was involved in that, where it's like this the Lector, I think it was called, and
submarines and
and a woman who's trying to defect from Russia and everything, and it's amid this Cold War climate. But so Fleming found a way to bring something that was a current event, but then incorporate the humor of it. And the best way to do that was he just made Connery the womanizer, or he made Bond the womanizer, and then he brought about good action. But the funny part to me is after Connery would finish a guy off, he would just relax and have his vodka martini shaken not stirred. No hair would be out of place, nothing, and he would just move on. So
That's totally it. And I think that's just it. Everyone's getting distracted with the persona who's playing it versus how is the character written. It's like, okay, the persona is kind of a typical Bond. And I'll even go back to an old ancient internet discussion from like mid 2000s where they're like, you know, who would win in a fight, you know, Jack Bauer, Jason Bourne, or James Bond. Is like, well, see, that's just it. 24, the TV show is pretty inspired by this. How could it not be? It's a spy show. But, you know, Jason Bourne is an actual, you know, like either version is a soldier. And, you know, Bond is pretty much, he even says in like one of the recent movies, he's basically a hitman and who just happens to work for a spy agency. So,
yeah,
I'm
it's
not
funny.
saying he's a lesser or petty.
He drives an Aston Martin.
Yeah, he's not proud of who he is.
I don't think a spy would be so apparent and driving an Aston Martin. He's kind of sticking out like a sore thumb when he's
so there you go. There's where Batman gets the whole, you know, bachelor playboy idea going for him, and so he is going around just doing all those various things, and you know, just trouble reads like a sore thumb on his head. He just is gonna get into trouble because he just stands out. He's the handsome dude, and he's going around, and so yeah, I think a lot of guys just dig the whole just raw energy and the whole not taking shit from everybody attitude. I understand how that can relate to anyone, whether they're macho or whether they're respectable. It's just it's just a fantasy, and they like that fantasy. So,
well, that's why we go to the movies.
Exactly, and he does get some real zingers of lines as opposed to some cringeworthy ones. I think towards the end of his era is when it's just because he's done with the franchise. You know, the enthusiasm
he wasn't as vested in the role. Like you can look at a movie like Diamonds Are Forever, and I like Diamonds Are Forever, but it was his last time.
It's got some good action in a Bond girl, but yeah, it's just like he is totally mute the whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, you know, his hairpiece looks terrible. His wardrobe even looks terrible, even for early 70s. Connery just didn't look like he cared about the role when he was doing Diamonds Are Forever, and he was cashing in $1 million paycheck, which back then, this was I think 1972.
Which is a shame,
that was a record salary for an actor to collect. He collected a record $1 million paycheck, if I'm not mistaken. I think
so. And this is before he does the unofficial, you know, spinoff that's technically now canon because now the studio owns that one. But it's one of those. It's like, geez. So he's already had. This is like the only time everyone does the whole James Bond may or may not be the same person. I don't think he's the same person. I know he's intended, but just the whole personas just don't match up with each other. So.
Of course not. No, of course not.
And so it's just funny how the only time it's contradicted is, you know, George Lazenby briefly comes in and they just follow that direct storyline where he got married and he's avenging his newly married person, but that's it. What's your take on Lazenby? I'll let you get to it.
I didn't think Lazenby was that bad. He was definitely a look-alike of Sean Connery. I think they were aiming for that more than a real actor, because Lazenby didn't have really any experience when he took that role, or they offered that role to him. His name wasn't even above
at the time, so
his name wasn't even above the title in the credits of the film. But I thought he was charming in the movie. I think it lent to the fact that there were some good highlights in that movie that were written. Some of the stuff in On Her Majesty's Secret Service I could dismiss. But I'm glad they went. I'm glad they eventually went the Roger Moore route, honestly. But Lazenby he looked like he could still pass as the same kind of guy as Connery. He looked good in fights. He did look good in those fight scenes and stuff, like in the opening scene on the beach.
And then they got freaking Kojak as the bad guy. So.
Yeah, they get Telly Savalas as Blofeld, as a variation of Blofeld.
Right. And I think that's the other issue too. Blofeld is portrayed not only by multiple actors but differently each time. So
Different variations.
so
Yeah,
growing
thought
up,
that was
I
weird.
could never connect the dots. I was like, oh, I thought he died in the last one. Oh, that
Right.
was him stroking that cat. We just didn't see his face. Oh,
Right. And then he's scarred. He's scarred. The Donald Pleasance performance.
definitely
gives
the
him
one I
dark
remember the
roasted
most.
eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's bald and everything. But then you've got the one playing Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever, and he couldn't look any further apart from the prior portrayals. It's like they really didn't care about consistency back then. They were just putting out a movie and that's it.
Right.
You couldn't get away with that today. I mean, people were
It gets away with it for popcorn reasons, but like you said, everyone.
people got out of sorts when Katie Holmes didn't return for The Dark Knight in the Christopher Nolan
Oh
trilogy.
my God.
That's another podcast. But back then, you could get away with it. You know, you could get away with without having the consistency. So long as you had your lead actor, as long as you had Sean Connery coming back, that the audiences seemed to forgive it, and they just enjoyed each installment one after the other.
Yeah.
With the Daniel Craig series, there's a lot more consistency. It's a lot of the same actors appearing on screen, and it's a continuous run-on story. I like that about the Daniel Craig ones. It's like a new development in the characters.
Very much so.
Yeah, and he's a tormented James Bond, as opposed to Connery. And Connery's, he's just doing the Playboy image, the relaxed Playboy image, who's comfortable in his tuxedo, and is happy to drink and smoke, and bed women as carefree as possible. So, yeah, once again, it's a reflection of the times.
And there you go.
Yeah.
So moving on to more, it's kind of funny how he's kind of the one of many people who determine what kind of a Bond fan you are. If people tell me he's my favorite, it's like, okay, so those are the type that just goofy shit, don't have to think deeply about it. And those who don't like it are those who are either easily stuck up or just not easily amused. So it's really tricky because in some ways he does how his character's written and the plot lines are kind of still going by the Connery era logic, but yet at the same time, they're also jumping on new trends and becoming very 80s or late 70s as a result. So
There they are. Yeah.
as a result,
they were also abandoning. Yeah, they were also abandoning the Blofeld motif. There was a lawsuit going on.
Yeah. So they're kind of just like, what's going on right now that we can jump on that bandwagon? It's like, okay, Star Wars is still out, so let's have one where it goes to space.
Right. Let's have the blaxploitation one, because
Let's have the blaxploitation and
Shaft was trendy at the time of Live and Let Die and the Pam Grier stuff and whatever. And then they go with Moonraker. Moonraker wasn't supposed to come out when it did. It was supposed to be For Your Eyes Only. But then because Star Wars was such a huge impact and basically just changed the movie-going experience in an entirely new direction that still continues to this day, Broccoli abandoned the For Your Eyes Only project and went straight to Moonraker. It's one of those errors that he disregards in the series, because at the end of Spy Who Loved Me, it says James Bond will be seen next in For Your Eyes Only. Well, no, he was seen next in Moonraker. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some sloppy planning going on in between there, and I think that's where everyone mainly lends it to. And to make it even more complicated, James Bond is very much a victim of nostalgia. So it's even harder to say what is the finest hour. I get that there are some people who like, not only making fun of goofy movies, but literally love everything James Bond related. So it's hard for them to discern what's the finest hour. I think there's some winners, then there's some bad ones, but then I also, again, just understand why he's one of the more popular ones, because it's just, there's a lot of goofy ones that you just can't help but just that put a smile on your face. It's like, Jesus, that was stupid, but I loved it.
The thing is the stories can be silly. They're very tongue in cheek. But the cool thing about the James Bond films, and it still goes on today with the Craig films, is they're not so reliant on CGI. I mean, if you
There's
compare,
CGI and just even a closed studio lot where he's driving, in the car against a blue screen.
but there's still real stunts going on
Real
in a lot of the
stunts. Even going to the actual places, like, hey, we're at the
Yeah.
Eiffel Tower.
this is shot on location. Like, yeah, even in a terrible movie like View to a Kill, I got to tip my hat to the fact that Roger Moore is climbing the steps of the Eiffel Tower, chasing after Grace Jones. But, you compare that to a series like Mission Impossible, and, you got Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise, and he's hanging on for dear life onto the train going through the tunnel. And it's like the CGI is so apparent in a scene like that. It's a thrilling scene, but it's apparent I'm seeing CGI. Whereas with the Bond films, they strive for the stunts. They strive for the real explosions. They're not they're not so reliant on miniatures or
Yeah, like
just
Octopus, he fucking opens up with he's just flat out raiding a circus and just cannon blasts right out of that whole place while leaving, like making a heat-seeking missile fire
yeah.
at the face.
Look
Like-
at the opening to you say what you want about the silliness of the Roger Moore series, but you gotta tip your hat to like an opening like Moonraker where they're jumping out of the plane and they're struggling in the sky and he's trying to get the parachute on and everything. It's fantastic stunt sequence.
Definitely.
And then it goes back to one of my favorite openings where he skis off the mountain in Spy Who Loved Me. That's all great stuff.
That like used like 3 different people for that one damn place, and it's like, geez, it's like, so not only were people making their living being this featured James Bond stunt double, like you're the car double, you're the train double, you're the skiing double, then there's the it's also fun seeing how many times they reuse certain actors. They've had the same M in Moneypenny, and so that's where the whole James Bond isn't the same person comes from. Is like there's multiple M's in Moneypennies. There must be.
Yeah.
So,
the M's were great. Bernard Lee, the original M, but then Judi Dench was a great response to the times of the 1990s with Goldeneye.
Yeah, and seeing some of her
first film, so.
That and seeing some of her TV co-stars, like the other guy who's her husband on As Time Flew By or whatever, is also kind of fun.
Yeah.
Then basically, well, we'll get to some of that later, but it's funny seeing Bernard Lee ended up and the Moneypenny gal end up playing again the same characters in the there's a bunch of Italian James Bond knockoffs from the 70s to 80s, and it's funny how in one of them ended up starring Sean Connery's brother Neil, which was also a Mystery Science Theater episode.
I recall reading about that. I haven't seen any of that, but I recall reading about that somewhere.
Yeah, Operation Kid Brother. And MST3K, everyone often remembers all those silly monster movies, and
Of course.
I mean, how could you not? But yeah, monster movies and just utter infamous exploitation stuff. But and Sword and Sorcery. But yeah, I always thought Sorcery and the spy ones were always underrated because they just would sneak in just so many risque jokes and other shit. But and just have more of a connection to just, hey, here's where famous people's less famous or infamous siblings got work on the side and played these movies on antenna channels. But I think that's also just it too. James Bond movies were a little easier to afford, so a lot of antenna stations would play different versions of those films, and so that was kind of filling. Even though there's all this risque content, there wasn't too much that they had to modify, and they just played in the evening hours.
Yeah, they had all the innuendo. The only thing they didn't do is we have yet to see a Bond picture where there's nudity. Who knows? In 50 years, maybe we'll see that. We won't be as.
They came pretty close, but damn. Yeah.
They always toe that line. They deliberately toe that line because they don't want to take it that far. At the end,
there's already been enough porn parodies of it.
Say that again. I didn't hear you, Cam.
There's already been enough X-rated parodies of it. So
yeah. It's more fun to you know,
Or my
award
dick
a
only.
Bond girl with a name like Zena on the top or Holly Goodhead. You know, I mean, you know, even Agent Triple X in The Spy Who Loved Me. You know, it's like we know what you're aiming for here. Pussy Galore, the one and only Pussy Galore.
Oh man, my grandmother can never believe that they made a character with such a name. She's like, good grief.
Well, you know, it's a year ago this month that I lost my dad. He passed away, and
Oh no.
yeah, he drove an Aston Martin. You know, after my mom passed 6 years ago, he decided he's going to go for broke, and he drove an Aston Martin, and he named it Pussy Galore. It's like, hey, more power to you, man. You know, it's like go
Whatever you got to do to remember the good times, you know.
That's right. That's right. So
I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. As James Bond as I guess I got, my grandmother was a big fan of the show NCIS, which had its spy elements, and I pretty much stopped watching it for a while because it was kind of a joy watching it with her, and she passed.
I've never seen one episode of any
good.
of the NCIS series. Not one episode.
I think you dig the original show. It's got Magnum PI type appeal, and it kind of goes.
Yeah.
And bringing that up, Magnum PI kind of had the whole James Bond motive of just kind
So
of
they did.
foreign intrigue and just likable, just going everywhere kind of mentality. And I wish I find that shows that have that mentality have a bigger success rate because you don't have to see every episode. You don't have to. And you have just such a pleasant, laid-back attitude. It's something that's missing from today's, not only just shows but movies.
Everything has to be binge watched today. Even sitcoms, you have to see the prior episode to understand.
Yeah, why does so and so hate their stepdad? Yeah, it's just like good grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Movies too. Everyone has to do the whole Matrix or Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, to be continued motive, and it's like no.
Well, yeah, the Marvel movies, you know, they're now harkening back to prior movies and stuff.
So they even end it now that way, and it's just a groan worthy because it's like it's not even original. It's like so and so will return, and you know, Caped Crusader.
And the formula's the same.
It is the same, so it's not as much fun. And some of it isn't fun at all. It's just like, please, just be you. Don't remind me of better stuff.
Right, exactly. But you know, with James Bond, it goes back to just. It's always best when it can reinvent itself. Sometimes it takes chances and it doesn't work. More often than not, I think it does. If it wasn't working, we wouldn't be having the 25th James Bond movie, hopefully coming out later this year. I got a hunch it's going to get pushed back again.
And that's why I went ahead just with this episode. I'm not going to wait on them to sort out. I mean, some of them will pull a Christopher Nolan, but you know, MGM is not Warner Brothers.
Yeah. I hope to see it this year. I was eager to see it in April. And then I just couldn't believe that, you know, it's when they announced that James Bond was getting pushed back, because that was the first one to get announced to get pushed back of all the movies. Then I knew this shit's getting real with this whole pandemic and everything. That's how much, at least I embrace James Bond. That's how much he's a pop culture thing. You know, my gosh, if they're pushing back a James Bond movie from release, well, then this shit must be real. That was the telling.
Well, yeah.
Regarding the COVID-19 spread and stuff. That's when I took it seriously.
Wasn't there a rumor that some of it was a little too close to home? They need to retool the story. Am I just making shit up here?
I didn't hear that. The thing that I heard was, and maybe this is spoiler alert, you know, turn down your podcast for a moment, but I heard that the film is going to be a harkening back to Dr. No. You know,
I did hear that part. Yeah, that's so. It's like Rami Malek, fresh off Bohemian Rhapsody. It's like, okay, so he's hot shit now, obviously.
Yeah,
an Oscar winner has to play an actor, and I guess that's my only issue with the franchise. There are so Ben Cross, Chariots of Fire, and Star Trek fame, and various other cable miniseries and B movies.
He just passed away last month.
Absolutely, and he was one of several actors who I wish could have played a James Bond villain.
Yeah, and he would have been great.
And as close as we'll ever get is he fights Bond actor, pre-Bond actor Pierce Brosnan in the UPN premiere movie Livewire.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
is
I haven't seen that, but yeah, it's interesting who would make great villains, and you know, everybody's been debating about Idris Elba. He would be the first African American James Bond.
there was that. Then there's the rumors of the female, and it's like, guys, you know, if that's what it is, I'll take it. That's fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
don't pull a whole Doctor Who and then don't say this is the same person if you're going to even do that. So,
you know, I don't object to Bond being a different demographic, whether he's African American or Asian. I don't object to that at all.
if he's got to do it, then do it.
So long as you got the charming actor. Idris Elba, he would have been great 15 years ago, but he's too old for the part now to carry a series of films. It's like when they put Ben Affleck in as Batman. He was fine in it, but he's too old to carry a whole series of films for the next 10, 15 years. But
better yet, young Ben Affleck would have been perfect. Now,
yeah, that's right. But it's too late now.
Ben Affleck, the actor and director, and who's about to be.
Yeah,
50,
so but here's what I would do with Idris Elba. I'd make him the Bond villain. He can make a great Bond villain later on.
Be more effective there than in Star Trek, where he's in heavy makeup and you don't even know it's him. So I mean, there's many people who could be Bond. Idris, as far as I'm concerned, did play Bond. He was in this movie called Bastille Day, known in the States as The Take. And so it's like that's a spy movie for Amazon Studios. He pretty much but that was more of an episode of Spooks, also known as MI5. A perfect Bond villain who, believe it or not, kind of channeled that would probably be Julian Sands. And he said he was inspired by a lot of 90s Bond films for his portrayal of the main Russian supremacist villain in the 5th season of 24. So I think he would have been perfect. Andrew Devoff, the Wishmaster and Toy Soldiers villain.
But all these guys could still work as a villain because the age doesn't necessarily matter on the villain.
Age doesn't matter, but like you say, is like any other actor who could have been playing Bond is just, again, that they can only play like hardened older spies, but not Bond.
That's right.
Hugh Jackman would have been great. Even McGregor was rumored, and it's like, what the fuck, people? Why are you waiting so long?
Well, they were doing well with Craig, and Craig wasn't ready to hang up the Walter PPK just yet. So they hadn't needed to search for somebody, you know.
Yeah.
So,
and one time on my desktop, someone did a cool Photoshop and making it look like Michael Fassbender was playing Bond, and it's like, Fassbender's kind of just been taking a break from film for a while and hasn't had any hits, so I don't think that would have worked.
He might be doing theater. Who knows? You know, a lot of these actors, they're stage trained first, and you never know.
That's a good point. There's a lot of these supporting people, and much like some of these Star Wars actors, who they share some of the same actors and even crew members and stunt performers with. Even assistant directors, and it's like, you look up their background, they got other than Bond or Star Wars, they got nothing but stage credits, and that's especially with the actor who played Ian McDiarmid, who played Emperor Palpatine in all the movies. It's like, Jesus, he would have been a perfect Bond villain, or
absolutely.
I would have even accepted him as M. I would have actually preferred to see him in a friendly role.
Is some element for him. He would have been.
He could be
perfect.
a British bureaucrat or congressman who's trying to shut the program down, saying he's run amok, he's caused chaos. Even though we already are a police state sponsoring bullshit faction, we cannot top that. That's bloody bad.
Hey, look, Star Wars stole a Bond villain with Christopher Lee, and yes. I wish Christopher Lee had a little bit more impact in the two films that he was in.
He was too busy
really
with
only
Hammer
shows
horror,
up
but
at the end of Clones, and then the beginning of Sith, and then he's gone. But
and that's kind of ironic you say that, because I always felt in those movies he was more of a Bond villain there than he was in Man with the Golden Gun, which is kind of a shame, because I don't really like the first half of Man with the Golden Gun, but the last part is kind of worth seeing, because that's kind of where it becomes kind of a Western gunslinger kind of showdown. It's like, okay, we're gonna have a fancy, tricky shootout and some other mind games going.
Well, with Golden Gun, I go against the grain of a lot of people that I read, whose opinions I read online, and
it's
Golden
kind of
Gun,
funny because it's old-fashioned Ian Fleming in a way.
Yeah,
and it up in the Moore era.
Yeah, I kind of like it. I like how Bond balances, the two Bond girls in that movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Good
That's
Night
where there is more than one Bond girl.
and Maud Adams. I can't remember the character's name that she played, Maud Adams.
But yeah, she's later.
There's that classic scene.
Octopussy,
Where,
yeah.
yeah, there's that classic scene where he's about to bed Maud Adams and Good Night, and then Maud Adams shows up and he's got to hide Good Night in the closet while he beds Maud Adams. It's like, I mean, you only get away with this with the James Bond picture. So
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. It doesn't really work in any other kind of spy movie or private detective.
yeah, it just doesn't. Nothing can come close to that anymore. But there's nothing like James Bond, I guess. It just continues to reinvent itself and to surprise you and such. I'm hoping that they do some kind of surprising plot development in No Time to Die to truly wrap up the Daniel Craig era and complete it more or less. They brought some dramatic license to it by making spoiler alert if you hadn't seen Spectre, but Blofeld is Bond's brother, and it's
Right.
like, that's what you do today. Fleming would probably object to that, but that's what you do today. I didn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, I
thought-
saw a lot of people who have defended so many other controversial movie decisions, and they weren't okay with that one. They just thought it was lame. It's like, so you're okay with maybe your Bardem still in a movie and all these other, Bond villains doing devious, cheesy things, and that one was the deal breaker for you? I personally, if anything, I would say it feels like a different movie in different acts, but I don't know. I'm glad.
I thought it gave some weight to the Blofeld character.
I mean, it wrapped up pretty much. They acted like it was the final go around, so they did the whole, wrap up the Mr. White storyline. And this is where the Bond films become a different type of spy film, where they're just like there's multiple different villains. There's not just one. So actually deal with all the other guys who've been pulling the strings, I didn't mind it, but I can understand how other, this is where it's just complex. We'll get to that. Let's go on to the Brosnan era, because that one is kind of interesting because one of my favorite character actors, a British actor, Colin Salmon, who's been on pretty much, look up his resume, he's been in everything. Strike Back, Resident Evil, Mortal Engines, Punisher, Warzone.
Yeah, he's that guy that you see in the movies, but you never can remember his name. You see the same face.
They mentioned his name like briefly, and it's like, God damn it, he has a name.
Exactly.
But yeah, he plays Charles Robinson, and he's always M's assistant. And for me, I felt like he was kind of a fun additional character, and he was even at one point rumored to take over Brosnan's era. It didn't happen, but it's like he's kind of the Felix Leiter of the team. And Felix Leiter, like Blofeld's another one they're inconsistent with. They have him be played in different ones. Well, I'm going to comment more on Timothy Dalton's era, but I felt like we've kind of discussed him enough. He's kind of like more in that they imitate a lot of his era, and then they go dark in one entry, and much like more, everyone responds to him differently. And even though he's also kind of channeling Connery's version of the book, and Brosnan here is kind of channeling just, if anything, he's kind of just going for the smoothness, and yet he's still kind of channeling his Remington Steele,
I was just going to say that. I mean, what got him the part, the Broccoli's had hired Brosnan to do The Living Daylights, and then, NBC wouldn't let Brosnan out of his Remington Steele contract, so he couldn't do the film. And, why was, Albert Broccoli interested in Brosnan? Well, it's because he played Remington Steele, and
he was supposed to do it. Then he had scheduled conflicts.
He was the guy who looked good in the suits and the tuxedos, handsome looking guy.
Irish, so there you go. And I mean, if you're gonna have a Scots play a British guy like Connery, then you can have an Irish dude. And It's kind of funny how, believe it or not, before this, he's in these two USA Network original movies called Detonator, and in one of them he faces off with former Bond villain, Christopher Lee, and they kind of have a Bond feel, but they are mostly just MacGyver type, you know.
He also did a Cold War kind of movie called The Fourth Protocol.
Yeah, and he plays a
Um,
villain.
Yeah, he was the villain in that. And who was that with? I think it was with Michael Caine. And it was slow moving kind of movie, kind of like a John le Carré storyline. But he's dabbled in this area before, and he
I
definitely
think that's
has
why
the
he was
tongue in
cool at
cheek.
it. He just was willing to just take it on. And, you know,
Yeah,
Roger
yeah.
Moore had played the Saint, but he had just done just little small stuff. He just kind of done every kind of thing before Bond. And if anything, Bond just gives him more offers, but it's still like a role he can't get away with. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, James Bond, James Bond.
Yeah,
My brother
you could
responds
say
to
he was
him.
typecast. You could say he was typecast, but you know, I'm grateful for it. We got some good movies out of the Brosnan.
Ironically, that's why my brother's middle name is Pierce. It's actually after.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Well,
it's funny. Fun little fact.
That,
And
that's fun.
he kind of associates him with the role the most because those are just the movies he's seen of Bond the most. So, I mean, I'm a bigger movie guy than he is. So, but it's kind of funny how everyone's got a different take on Bond. And I definitely have a lot more fun with the Brosnan ones, but I can also see why some people are like, no go. Just different types of movies. And that's kind of where we are with Craig, different kinds of movies. So, I guess you could say I build onto Bond more either just because of the one-liners he lets off or just the villains. The villains are just a lot of fun for me, but
Well, you know,
they go
like,
off the rails at the end. I'm not gonna lie.
two critics that I admire more than anything were Siskel and Ebert, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert,
Mm-hmm.
and their take for a good adventure film, whether it's James Bond or Batman or whatever it is no good action picture works unless the villain works. And
Yes.
I think you'll find more often than not the best Bond movies were the ones that had the best villains. Like, you know, people really don't talk about The World Is Not Enough because it didn't have, it had a different kind of villain in the fact that it's a woman.
It has too many villains, yeah.
It's got too many villains. It runs too long. It goes into a million different directions. But no one talks about that movie anymore. And almost they should, because that was one of the first times that M gets swept up into the adventure. You know, M gets captured and everything.
Yeah, Robinson has to help him out.
But it just didn't score well enough. And I think it's because the villain wasn't all that exciting. It was with the guy from The Full Monty.
Yeah,
And you thought,
Robert
Carlyle. And you thought he was going to be great. And he had a great, you know, deficiency about him where he's got this bullet that's lodged in his brain and is killing him slowly and he can't feel pain. And I'm like thinking, that's kind of cool. But then you really don't see him do anything in the movie.
He's kind of like Jaws, where it's just, we got to get a silly gimmick in there, and then we got to can channel the same stuff going on from the last one. But like you say, it's just kind of, I think you'll find some people like it more than it was, but I remember it was popular to hate, and I didn't have any choice. It was one of the ones that was on TV the most, so I saw it the most. So I think everyone's mostly distracted by Denise Richards playing, you know, sexy signs. It's like, doesn't work, but it kind of works if you think about it for a Bond movie. And
here I go against the grain again. I didn't have a problem with Denise Richards. I mean, I wasn't like, wow, this is the best Bond girl ever. Far from it. Nowhere in the top 10 or top 15.
No.
But at the same time, I didn't think it was a shortcoming. Tanya Roberts in View to a Kill, that's a shortcoming.
Oh God, yeah.
But Denise Richards, I don't know. She was there and she was saying the lines that were written.
She was hired because she was cute, and that's I don't mean to sound like a sexist, but that's part of the franchise.
Physicist? Sure, tell me she's a nuclear physicist. I'll buy it. Honestly, I mean, we're talking about James Bond here, you know.
Yeah. And I go by Bond logic. I don't go by movie logic, because Bond, you know, again, he's invincible. That's why people go to this. So you just need to make everyone not be bored by the second chapter, because we know he's going to win anyway. So we have to just have a reason to why. I mean, there's a great example in one of these screenwriting books. It's probably Save the Cat or something. And they mention how if the main hero isn't changed, then everyone else around him has to change or affect him somehow. And that's what Bond pretty much always got right. It's like, okay, so he's gonna cry or just look annoyed when the person he slept with last night got killed, and he avenges her for 20 minutes and then goes on to the next mission. So
Exactly. Yeah.
there's
It's
that.
even going back all the way to Goldfinger. The girl gets covered in gold paint, and Em accuses Bond of making this a personal vendetta. And it's like, well, you really don't see much of a personal vendetta happening through the picture,
No.
from then on. It's not like Timothy Dalton's License to Kill, where that's a vendetta picture. That's a revenge picture. But,
Spy assassin movies, if anything, they work the best because now you have to organize all the mayhem. Who's going to get killed first? Who's going to do what? And then you got to just find out when you're actually making it, how to make it interesting, because they don't teach you how to write action, for scripts. It, what you see on screen only lasts, a sentence. Then, what actually becomes a 5-minute sequence in the actual thing. So
in the script it says Bond parachutes out of a plane, and the screenwriter's like, the director will figure all that out. I just gotta move.
They don't, and plus they just don't know. They don't know if it's gonna just be a 1-minute segment and it's a montage, and they cut away, do the whole, iris,
Yeah, well, like with the Fleming novels, he's got a lot of the action scenes that we saw in the Connery and Roger Moore eras. Those action scenes were in the Fleming novels, but they all became a mixed bag when they were adapted to film those action scenes.
There's many of them where I had many pals who would say, yeah, it only has to do with like the half of the first chapter. They just took the name.
Like something that happens in You Only Live Twice is staged in Thunderball. It's two different stories going on, but they took an action scene from You Only Live Twice and incorporated it into Thunderball. Because they do what's convenient. They do where they can get rights for filming locations and the capability of doing the stunts and whatnot. So they're constantly adjusting the script, I believe, to keep the thrills alive and finish the picture. So if it says a car chase on the script, but they can't get the car chase, but they can do a boat chase, well, then they're going to change it to a boat chase and work it that way. So we've been talking about the Brosnan pictures, and the two Dalton pictures are pretty interesting too, because Dalton was a major departure from Roger Moore, and
in the second movie especially, is like the first movie he's kind of doing what Connery and Moore are doing, but it's still it's the same crew members, so it's got some of the same style and music.
I'm a huge fan of Living Daylights, actually.
I am too, and everyone likes to bash that one, and License to Kill is another one based on who you talk to. Some people are going to say worst movie I ever saw, other people are going to say the best of the best, and I'm just like, Living Daylights, I think I just find pleasant. Just have it on in the background, have a movie night. If you're going to do a Bond marathon, it's like, if we're going to do one Dalton, then let's do this one, because this is just very laid back, and
it's a real sophisticated movie too, like
Carl a year before Die Hard's in there, and even what's his name, who later is the bad guy in the movie version of The Fugitive, is a fun colonel guy. He's always just taunting.
Oh yeah, Jerome Crabb. Yeah,
German actor. Yeah, and he's just like, what next?
Yeah, but I like the sophistication of that movie. Like it opens up at a symphony, and
a training montage gone wrong, and he's like having to find the intruder there, and then he's more.
Oh, the Rock of Gibraltar sequence is amazing. I love that sequence.
And then he's using the gadgets with the car, and he's having to again develop some chemistry with the Bond girl Mariam Diabo, and then
that's my favorite Aston Martin. That car.
That is a cool Aston Martin, but it's kind of ironic how instead of him skiing, it's the villains who are skiing this time. It's like, okay, cool. That's kind of a throwback both to Moore, but also just gives him something different to do. He's having to go past various checkpoints.
It was different. They were showing some new things in that, and I even like, I might be butchering her name here, but Mariam Diabo, the Bond girl. And, you know, she was the only Bond girl in the picture other than the one in the boat at the beginning of the movie. But they went that way because the AIDS epidemic was topical in 1987, and they didn't want Bond recklessly sleeping around. But I thought as a Bond girl,
she's going to encourage everyone to get pregnant.
Exactly.
Propaganda.
Well, Bond could never get anybody pregnant. No, he could never do that unless we're going to get some kind of surprise with No Time to Die. Who knows? But Living Daylights was, I thought, a really first-rate, you know, end of the Cold War kind of thriller. And it's funny. Bond is helping the Afghans, you know, and you know the Afghans are the good guys working with James Bond in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, it works better than Rambo.
Things are different today. You know?
It's better than Rambo Free.
That's a perfect example of, you know, James Bond responds to the times. You know?
Responds to the times, and I don't know. I'm always for Akira Kurosawa save the village, you know, Seven Samurai type mentality. I mean,
yeah,
why not?
Magnificent Seven kind of stuff.
Magnificent Seven, Return of the Jedi. I don't mind. Just go for it.
The A-Team, anything like that. Absolutely.
The A-Team, yeah. If it can work for the best Star Trek episodes, then why not that? So I mean, and everyone just, again, people like to bitch, and I just go unpleasant. Is it comfort food or is it a drag? Is it worth a watch or is it too much fucking trouble just for one scene that you want to see? Now, don't get me wrong. James Bond in this instance, you got to see them all.
Absolutely.
So they're all worth seeing once, even the bad ones, even the good ones, obviously. But, I mean, just you got to see them all because you can't make up your mind saying this guy's the best. And like you say, nostalgia and the whole just Bond being kind of a everyday man. I mean, it's a way better premise than, say, if you do a comic book movie and then you got to introduce all these human characters that had nothing to do with it into the mix, because then that gets messy because it's like we're not here for them, you know. It's like Godzilla.
Well, you know, like you look at the superhero movies of today now, they're all advertising the next movie to come. The DC
is
DC
like
flicks and the Marvel flicks. The Marvel flicks weren't doing it so much in the beginning. It was like exclusive.
But I detected the money on them back when they were first struggling.
And look, I don't blame the studios for doing it. They've made an exorbitant amount of money, and fortunately, for the most part, the films are great.
Yeah, I don't blame the studios, but I just blame people who believe everything a certain producer says, and I'm like, oh, you know, fuck.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We may talk about video games,
Music.
Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Yes.
I am the master storyteller
Yes.
of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair to say
Ah. Ah.
all
Yeah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll go end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little history all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be
did
a
you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-last plot holes and gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Hi, everybody. It's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything: pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
We now continue with our program.
They're money men, and the difference is whether or not, they're like Joel Silver, where they like movies and they're passionate about what they're advertising, or if they're like every other producer, is just like, yes, people will respond to this, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
like, Bruckheimer, he clearly likes movies.
I think what producers have to do is they have to step away from trying to please every single attendant in the movie.
Yeah, just your name already means a lot. So yeah, just do what you do instead of every fucking interview.
Right, exactly.
And the director is always the hired gun. I don't care what anyone says, unless your name is Scorsese or Spielberg, you have zero control. So do not do this whole, but people don't get that. I have friends who love to blame, whoever wrote or directed it. It's like, you don't even know the half of it,
Right.
Half the time, the name that, is on there had zero involvement. They're just getting credited because they were the first person who wrote it. So every movie gets like 20 plus rewrites before it's even, sometimes while it's even filming. And, again, the director's just there to tell the assistants and, other second unit people what he needs, to have done. And they shoot it for him. And, everyone's doing the whole, well, Christopher Nolan does all his other stuff. And like, and Tarantino insists on it. It's like, yeah, well, they're kind of abusing their privilege.
Yeah, but they're directing their own inventions. James Bond is not their invention. It's
not everyone can do everything. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's not a sign of defeat.
But you want to talk about directors that made an impact on Bond. I mean, I turn to Daniel Craig's first movie, Casino Royale.
That's kind of the one everyone agrees on, but it's also was the one.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite of the entire series.
Oh, absolutely. But it was interesting because it kind of just got people into Bond again. And that's where I was catching up with them.
It reinvented the series. They carried the torch that Batman Begins did with Christopher Nolan. They reinvented the character. That had never been done before. Now Star Trek has done it, and the DC movies have done it. And
that's true. It's like, it's the go-to movie for if you need to reboot a franchise. It's like, okay, let's do a greatest hits. Let's do a darker take. And I mean, it even fucking starts in black and white. I don't think I can't think of any Bond that's done a neo-noir type look.
But it also starts without the sniper scope, with Bond walking into the sniper scope. It doesn't even do that.
Yes, there's that. It has a very suspenseful gambling game, and usually when there's a gambling game in a Bond thing, you got, Dalton Brosnan and obviously Connery, which is the heavy influences, but they don't last more than like a few minutes. Usually it's like how you introduce Bond in the movie, especially Dr. No. It's like to see him be doing an entire poker game that's connected to the whole villain conspiracy, and while the Bond girl also has to be heroic and
there was a weighted interest in the Bond girl, in Ava Green playing oh my gosh, her character's name escapes me at the moment. Vesper, of course, Vesper Lynn. The reason why I think that's a well-directed picture, where I think that Martin Campbell, the director, really got himself involved in that picture, is because there was some really heavy acting in that film. It wasn't just Bond moving from one death-defying moment to another, and the girl is just the damsel in distress. There was a connection there, and it was all relevant to a well diverse and multi-dimensional storyline going on.
Eventually, yeah. And I wasn't really surprised when everyone's got all mixed all over these other movies, because I mean they're pretty much all sampling not only other franchises again, but I mean they're doing their own thing, and that's just why everyone just differs on Bond. It's because they're never consistent or the same thing each time. No one knows what to expect, so that's why I see some people saying, I refuse to rewatch that one, I didn't enjoy it, and there's others like, yeah, I liked it on the second viewing. So I'm just like, okay, I just noticed something different on each Bond go around. The only one that never, in my opinion, virtually has never changed on was probably Moonraker. I just can't, it's just so boring for me. But I see others who they grew up on that, and it's like they love the whole ideas and the goofiness of it. So it's kind of where we are with Craig now. Everyone's just like, it's like they want him to play the role, or they just want him to give it up and just go on to the next one because the actor's been so outspoken. I think if Craig had just been more careful and not been as injured, he would just have more of a blast instead of, okay, I'll do it, but because only I can play it. And then, oh, well, you better up my salary because I'm going to get hurt on this one. That's a fucking bitch of a movie. And I don't know why. Is Rachel Weisz supposed to play the Bond girl in this one, or?
No.
Okay, that kept being a rumor.
And Rachel Weisz isn't in No Time to Die.
Actress wife, yeah. I think they would have had some fun had they actually jumped on that bandwagon, but they didn't.
Hey, look, maybe she makes a cameo. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm hoping for some surprises with
pretty much. Much like all the Star Wars, I see various direct parallels, because how can I not? So basically Casino Royale is a direct Connery tribute, and then Quantum of Solace is pretty much the license to kill the franchise. You either like or hate it, depending on who you talk to. And then
I lean negative on Quantum of Solace. I do.
It's all good. Well, and we do not influence each other, and we do not, Bond is just very conflicted.
Hey, look, man, that's what makes movie going, not just James Bond, but movies in general. It's like, if we have these difference of opinions and stuff, it's great that we can talk about these things.
It gets lousy when everyone's like, and I find that those who don't get along are just those who, like the people in my previous podcast I was a part of, they don't know how to back anything up. They are only good at just saying, oh, but it's so good. Oh, it's so boring. And it's like, nah, what are you, 5? Come on.
If you think, okay, it's
give
boring.
me a conversation, please.
Tell me why it's boring.
Well, and when you have just such polarizing or just beyond just vague acclaim or vague bashing, then it really does kill the mood in the room. So, and even though we're recording afar overseas, it's like it doesn't change anything. You got to really bring a lot. And Skyfall is one of those I hated at the time, but I can still find watchable now. I know I understand why everyone likes that one, because again, at this point now they're just looking at the humanity of Bond, and it's just not, you really can't even place it. I guess you could say Majesty's Secret Service, but that's it. It's like it's the most non-Bond of the Bonds, but at the same time echoing
It's
early.
funny that you call it Yeah, well, it's funny that you call Skyfall non-Bond because in a way it's not Bond's story, it's M's story. I think more
That's
than
it too, and that's just it. Is like they can't put that in the marketing procedure. They got to get everyone's attention each Super Bowl and show you, some of the stunts. It's like M has always been secondary. At first, I didn't like how they killed her off. Now I understand why they did it, and I kind of like how it plays a part in Spectre. It's like
totally shocked me, and I'm grateful for it.
I mean,
I'm glad they did it, because when you have an important death in a film, it could be Obi-Wan Kenobi, it could be Mickey from Rocky, or it could
that's
be
a
M
good
from
point.
James Bond.
It's got to be the mentor. It's definitely got to be someone who, in this case, she has loved Bond like a child. If she wasn't so old,
but
they
M
would
is
be.
In over 20 movies, M never died.
M
So
never
it's not
died.
like-
She was the exposition and the wit
Yeah,
kind
she-
of saying, "Oh,
she
you're
was
such
the
a."
one behind the desk. She was the one behind the desk who appears about 15, 20 minutes into the picture to say, we've been tracking this one guy, this, that, and the next thing. You're to go to Jamaica or wherever you're supposed to go and find out what he's up to. And then you would see M at the end of the picture, and that's it. And, with Skyfall, it became an M storyline. So I kind of appreciated that. It was going in a different angle, a different direction. My problem with Skyfall is that I found some of the editing of the story to be a little bit too contrived, like Javier Bardem. Javier Bardem, he's an awesome villain in the part. It's a testament to how good an actor he is, that he can put on Oscar caliber performance in a James Bond picture still. And the character times a train to crash through the ceiling, on the moment that he delivers a line, and it's like, that's a little bit too contrived for me. I don't know about that. So
I'll build on that. It's definitely, I could do without the first half because it takes its time. The opening chase scene just doesn't excite me at all. So I don't care for
Really?
the action in this, but yeah, it just doesn't go anywhere. I don't like how it's shot, but I can understand why everyone had issues with that in the last one. And yet this one, I just don't feel anything. I don't know what's going on, so I don't really care what's going on. But the second half, where he's actually having to go back to his childhood home, that's where the movie works best, I find, in the second half. But like you say, Javier Bardem stills every scene. He's still channeling his No Country for Old Men type presence.
Yeah, that monologue he gives in his introductory scene. I love that monologue that he gives about the rats.
The rats. Now, I will say, when it goes into Joker Dark Knight territory, that's where it does feel like they're just trying to be every other kind of blockbuster at that time. It's like, you guys can just be you. You don't have to be Christopher Nolan-esque.
Yeah, you make a good point with that. Yeah, I'll give you
so it's a mixed bag. I did not like it the first 3 times I watched it, but as I watch all these Bond movies multiple times, it's grown on me a little bit. I'll just say this. It had the style. It had the cool premise. Totally inappropriate score and director. Sam Mendes, they should have just hired someone who was an action guy. They should have just brought Martin Campbell back. Mendes.
Well, I'm glad they didn't bring Mark Forster from Quantum of Solace back.
That's all right. He's kind of more of an art house guy too, so that's just it. It's like, why are you guys bringing in all these art house people? I mean, Mark Forster does stuff like Monsters Ball, which I think is good for what it is, but Quantum got bogged down in rewrites. I like the stuff dealing with Mr. White, but I can understand why some people are just like, I don't like the License to Kill type stuff. I'll admit, just the only stuff that kept me interested was the Bond girl in that one, but I can understand how other people are like, yeah, fuck it, I don't like it at all. So
I didn't think they did enough with the Bond girl. Like towards the end of the picture, he drops her off, and she just walks away into the middle of nowhere. So that didn't wow me.
That wasn't a good payoff. Yeah.
Yeah, I also had problems with some of the staging of the stunts, like the kinetic feel of the opening sequence of Quantum of Solace. It's very choppy, deliberately choppy. They're trying to get your heart racing from the get-go.
I kind of like the rooftop stuff because that's the only moment where it's just funny, where he has just like, here, let me give you a hand, or let me drop my hand, or some shit he says to him.
Exactly.
It's like, but that's it. It's like they
Yeah.
should have just kept Martin Campbell, I think, throughout the whole franchise, because I get that he wanted to do something else besides Bond, but he
did Green
understood it
Lantern.
wrong. Yeah, and so that's where it's like, what the fuck? You wanted to do that where you had no creative control, and it put you on every Razzie list. And it's like, you did Goldeneye, for fuck's sake. You know how to stage character and action, and it's like, should have kept him on for at least some of these now. And I get that it doesn't matter because all the second unit people are doing all the action segments, but you could at least do the dramatic segments because you know how to make it thrilling. And it's like Mendez and Forster, should have just stayed in their cages and not taken the gig, because Forster, I've liked some of his stuff, but he's never perfect. And he seems to just constantly get into issues with the lead star and the studios not all sharing the same vision. And Mendez, I mean, other than Road to Perdition, I have never cared for any of his movies. I get that some people are like, oh, you should see 1917. I'm like, I've seen plenty of movies that don't have any
1917 is a spectacular technical movie.
That's good. I'll see it soon.
I don't need to see it. I don't need to see that again. I got to admit, though, Cam, I'm not on the same page with you regarding Sam Mendes.
It's all good. It's all good.
For both pictures, I did. I liked what he was doing with Craig. He worked with Craig before on Road to Perdition.
Yeah, Road to Perdition was kind of the one that got me interested in him, and then I've just done rewatches, and it's like, yeah, it's a Godfather inspiration movie. I just never got an original vibe from him.
Mendes also goes intimate, like he did. His first film was American Beauty, of all things. Like the director of American Beauty is doing James Bond. I mean, how do you connect those two?
I don't see any connection. I mean, I just couldn't get into a way. I understand the Beauty one. That was a very popular one, and got Kevin Spacey on the award circuit. In fact, Spacey before
won Best Picture. Yeah, won Best Picture and director.
I just couldn't get into Revolutionary Row, and away we go. But I mean, Spacey, had he not been a piece of shit, I think would have been a perfect Bond villain.
Oh, well, he did. Hey, look, he did a pretty good Lex Luthor, even. So yeah, Spacey would have been a great Bond villain. There's so many great character actors that would be awesome Bond villains that Eon Productions could capitalize on. And No Time to Die will not be the last James Bond film.
Oh, fuck no. But
regardless of how it performs amidst the pandemic and everything. And we'll see plenty of opportunity. James Bond is going to outlive you and I. And,
yeah. I mean,
that's the beauty of it. It's
let's
arguably the longest running franchise going, longer than Star Trek even, so.
Yeah. Danny Boyle was supposed to do it. He's never been one of my guys. I know.
I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad he didn't.
Slumdog Millionaire, that's not the kind of Bond I want to see. Now,
no.
Who's doing this new one? Who's helming it? I get that it's the same writers.
Hold on here. I got it up here.
The guy who did every other HBO thing. Yeah.
Kerry. I'm gonna butcher his last name.
Soji Fukujama. Yeah, so he did Beast of No Nation, Jane R adaptation, and True Detective. Yep. So
True Detective, great series. Yeah, at least for season 1.
See, that's just it. I couldn't ever get into that, and I'm a big HBO guy. But he's got the visual look, he's got the mood, and hopefully he's got a good story here. So, I approve of that. Not that it matters; it's already in the can. But so shit, they're gonna keep. I think just hiring different people. Hopefully, they can find a little more consistency. I just think movies work better if they keep the same people each time instead of just got to be a different persona each time. I think Denis Villeneuve, who's doing the new Dune, would be perfect because, I mean, Mastermind and brought us Prisoners, Sicario, and a bunch of other, French Canadian dramas. But that's it. And he seems to be like the only blockbuster guy they let do whatever he wants because his, even if his last few pictures weren't a hit. Seems like the only one everyone's divided on is the new Blade Runner, but that was it. I guess Spectre, I guess everyone has issues with it because there's a car chase that doesn't really go anywhere in that one, and it has a different vibe after Bautista's henchman disappears. I just think it's just laid back. It's like the closest to me personally in terms of Casino Royale.
I like Spectre a lot, and Spectre's got a fantastic opening sequence at the Day of the
No,
Dead.
is the helicopter going upside down, for fuck's sake?
Yeah, and talk about real stunts. What we were talking earlier about CGI, not CGI. There, they got the professional helicopter pilot to do those.
Almost kill himself. Jesus.
With the chopper and everything. Fantastic opening sequence. I think it had the potential for a really good storyline. I like how they return to the Mr. White character. And Christoph Waltz, you talk about who are going to make great Bond villains. It's like, how is Christoph Waltz only now becoming a Bond villain with Spectre? How could he not have been chosen earlier in his career?
The closest he gets is Gary.
Put him on the mainstream map. My one reservation with Spectre is that Christoph Waltz wasn't used enough in the picture. I mean, he's such a capable actor. And
they kind of take their sweet time getting to him. And then the Maya gal, she's a beauty who's been in various not safe for work movies.
She's nothing exciting in the picture. She looks fantastic.
Yeah, they don't really use her.
Yeah, they don't use her enough. I think, and the trailers for No Time to Die seem to imply that they're making a bigger role for her. The trailers imply.
You can tell.
I hope they do. And I hope they do more with Christoph Waltz. I hope he's not just...
it's going to be a repeat of like Majesty's Secret Service or even Quantum, where she dies and they have to avenge her, I think. So
I was predicting that ever since Spectre came out. I was like thinking, oh, Daniel Craig's going to do one more, and they're going to open it where she gets killed in the opening sequence or something like that. It doesn't look like that's how it's going to go down, but that's what I was predicting way back when.
Why not? So, I mean, Bond's feeling a little less like, I guess, Spooks. Well, maybe a little bit. I don't know if you ever saw that show. It's known as MI5 here in the States.
No, I never heard of Spooks. No.
Okay, yeah, it used to be on PBS all the time. It's just another. And they even did a movie continuation, and it's one of those. It's like it seems like Bond has just all been more about being more realistic, and that's just it needed that fan base as well as the older fan base returning who always sees anything Bond related. I don't think it can be any better or worse. Well, I take that back. It can be better, but at the same time, I mean, I'm just happy if they just continue Bond from that point on. I actually wouldn't mind if they even change owners, if the producers sell it off to a different company, because, it's been for so many owners, and
it'll never happen.
Yeah, I know it won't happen. It's their baby, but
it's going to stay with the Broccoli family
until they die and their children
generations to come.
Yeah,
it'll just never happen. Never.
I wish.
It's a moneymaker. It's a shooting elephant. Think about it. The Broccolis, they don't produce any other films. They only produce James Bond. So
Bond is also just one of those. I've seen people bash it over the years because they just could never get into it. They're like, oh, my dad's watch it all the time. It drives me crazy. And it's just like, James Bond is just one of those pop culture icons. You got to like some degree of it. It's reason it's talked about all the time. It's just one of those things. People want to be a spy in there secretly. In their fantasy world. So, I mean,
a wealthy spy, a guy who drives the Aston Martin and wears the finest clothes.
It's a fantasy.
Who can drink endlessly. I mean, the guy has the most endurable liver of any human being.
Absolutely. He's got probably every kind of sexually transmitted disease. He's got, who knows how many cars that have been blown up.
He used to smoke endlessly. He gave that up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that I can't. Did he even? Yeah, he doesn't even smoke in any of the Craig ones, does he?
The last Bond to smoke was Dalton. Dalton smoked in License to Kill.
There you go.
But one thing.
Can't have sex, but you can have smoking.
Exactly. But one bit of trivia is when Roger Moore took over the the role with Live and Let Die, they deliberately had him smoking cigars as opposed to cigarettes, because they wanted to imply that this isn't Sean Connery anymore. This is now Roger Moore. You know, we're going with, you know, a different kind of villain. He's going to smoke something differently. He even carries a different gun in Live and Let Die. He carries a revolver as opposed to the Walter PPK. He doesn't drive the Roger Moore Bond never drove an Aston Martin. You know, he drove the Lotus. The Lotus is free. So
and he uses plenty of, and they do kind of do a throwback to the whole car that has the, you know, ejector seat.
yeah, you know, and it's funny, you know, the one thing I wish they would explain more is how Daniel Craig continues to use the Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger and Thunderball. Like, you know, we saw the thing get blown to bits in Skyfall, and, you know, I know Q is very inventive and stuff, but I mean, come on, Q. It's like, how are you gonna rebuild this car? The thing is kindling now, for God's sakes, you know.
Pretty much.
But it's one of those things that you just throw away. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't take away from the movie. It'll bother other fans, you know, purists. And
Skyfall, they spend so much time saying how he's technically bisexual, and I'm just like, whatever. I remember the actor was talking about
once again, that's a response to the times. It's a response to the
times. I know the actor had talked about doing that to push boundaries back in the day. And at the same time, I'm just like, why are we making a big deal about this? And anyone who's got a problem with it, you're clearly a homophobe. Now, to be fair, the filmmakers spend way too much time on it. It's like, it doesn't fucking matter. It's just supposed to be a joke. Jesus. So I hope they get better filmmakers. I hope they get just whoever they pick next is worthy. And I hope they just try and do their own formula each time, instead of, we got to be like the last generation. We got to shoot it exactly the same.
Right.
Yeah, I think Thomas Newman scored Spectre again, and it was slightly better. I don't know. I just didn't care for the Skyfall score, so I just something about not having John Barry or David Arnold. Just I missed it. I really did.
They're traditional. They're traditional to the series, you know.
They're traditional, but they were kind of my John Williams, Hans Zimmer, and I don't know.
Yeah, I like the theme song from Adele. I do. I liked every single theme song of the Craig films. I even like the new one from Billie Eilish. I like them.
I guess that's fair. I mean,
they seem to parallel the story, and I even like, you know, the Quantum of Solace is towards the bottom of my list, but that the song from Jack White and
Alicia Keys,
Alicia Keys, Another Way to Die. My partner with Eminem at the Movies, Miguel Rodriguez, and we love that song. Absolutely love that song.
Yeah.
But most people hate it. If you go on the Facebook pages and stuff, that's the one that you list that they hate. But I'm like, this thing freaking rocks.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to hate it just because Alicia Keys the vocals. I was a fan just because of the Rock and Tours, you know, freaking Jack White.
Yeah, and it sounds dangerous and everything.
I just like the kind of acoustics, but yeah,
the lyrics. I like the lyrics. You know, a bomb on the table, and the title of the song, you know, Another Way to Die. It's like, where else are you going to use this song? In what other movie use this song?
It's a total throwback to Bond. I guess I like the whole, you know, Chris Cornell, you know, there you go, of the late Chris Cornell of Audio Slave and Soundgarden, because that's also a song that just, it's a great on its own tune.
Name. Yeah, and I mean, it's an appropriate song because
it's an appropriate song.
Casino Royale reinvents the series, and we're being introduced to a new character who just happens to be named James Bond with
but it's so it's so good though that it was used at a few different, like, I've seen it used at different award shows and even YouTube tribute videos. It's just that kind of a cool song. So I mean, I don't have anything against Sam Smith. I've heard some of Disclosure. I guess that was the
I like that.
I guess that song was a little I think everyone was just turned off just because the opening animation was just kind of meh. But I mean, the song.
Well, the octopus.
Yeah. So I mean, it's inevitable. I'm not a Billie Eilish gal, but it is what it is. That's the song. So I mean, you can't say that there wasn't any other Bond movie where you liked it, but you weren't with the theme song. And I'm just like, hey, this is Bond. Bond is like Saturday Night Live, where it's not going to get everything to everyone's preference, but you can't hate it all based on just one thing. Like, oh, I like the movie.
But that's what's great about James Bond.
Exactly. There's going to be.
We have all these debates, these spirited debates about what we like and what we don't like, and it keeps the franchise alive. It just does.
Totally. I mean, the worst Bond villain to date might be, I don't know, one of the lesser Moore outings, or even whoever the main one was in Die Another Day. Just his acting was just all over the place bad. But
terrible. Poorly written.
Oh yeah, and a repeat of every Connery Brosnan satellite film. Yeah, and he's been bearable in other ones, but even before that, he's like, something I don't like about that guy. I don't know, he's probably a nice person, but I was like,
Die Another Day. The first half of the picture is pretty good. It's pretty intriguing. Like, that kind of shocked me. Bond is captured for 13 months. He's a prisoner. He's held captive in North Korea for James Bond doesn't get captured and be held for 13 months.
There was that.
James Bond always finds his way out, but suddenly he's grown a beard, he's been tortured, so on and so forth, and his country abandoned him. And it's like, this is a good twist here. This is a good turn.
Holly Berry as Jinx.
And then it gets all sci-fi stupid and
yeah.
And Holly Berry, good actress.
I think she should have had her own Jinx spinoff, but she has nothing to do really in the last half.
Right, and they were going, for lack of a better term, forgive me here, but I think they were even going a little bit too ghetto with her on some of her line delivery.
Some of her lines and just all the puns.
Your mama, it's like, yeah, come on, Halle Berry's better than this.
Well, that's it.
So write her better than this. Write the character better than this.
Well, and that's just it. Everyone's like, why do you accept scripts? It's like, it doesn't matter what the script is. Sometimes you just want to work with certain people, and when you're asked to be on a James Bond movie, you always say yes if you're a fan.
You never turn it down. Right, right. You want me to be a tree in the background of a James Bond movie? I'm going to do it. And
I think the biggest issue.
I thought Halle Berry was a spirited choice to pick for a Bond girl. She's different. She's exotic. She's fantastic looking. I just didn't think they wrote the Jinx character well enough.
Well, and going against the typical Bond thing is like, there's some practical stuff, but there's also some sped up CGI shit. And it's like, no, what are you doing?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, they were going Matrix-like with it, with some of the editing.
This is it. Everything has to be.
And the ice palace, the hotel made out of ice. Who's gonna want to stay in a room that's made out of ice? I mean, truly.
And 2002 is a huge year for Infamous and Awesome. There's so many hit movies as well as action, especially, and it's like it kind of gets overshadowed by all the other movies that are kind of James Bond knockoffs. So it's just like it didn't even need to come out, did it? And it's just like overshadowed. So I mean, I love Paul Oakenfold to death, but his score is just so out of place because even on its own, it's like, why is there electronic music playing? There's no computer tech or anything. What the hell?
Yeah, it was like club music almost.
The club music, but it's playing even when they're not at a club, and it's just like, okay. So
now I will say this: I didn't mind Madonna doing the song.
I understood why they did that. I mean, they had to find some famous pop star, just like Paul McCartney or
Yeah, and Madonna's another performer who always reinvents herself. Oftentimes now it doesn't work, in my opinion. It's just not something I care for, but she's all synthesized on the song and stuff, but I didn't mind the composition on that song.
Yeah, but it's just we're distracted by all the other just montages. It's like, so Bond's being tortured. He really doesn't look any different, even though he's clearly in pain, and then he gets away scot-free, and it's like, oh, he just jumped off a boat, and after
slips to the hotel.
It's like, guess it's that easy. So I mean, in many ways, it just was a little past its prime, so everyone's just kind of getting sick of it. So, I mean, I think that's where we are now. I mean, people want to see Bond, but they're just like, okay, Craig doesn't want to do the role, so what? Just go out with a bang. If you don't go out with a bang, so what? At least you were Bond for 5 fucking times, and now we got to go to the next guy. So if you had to do a suggestion, what kind of unknown or semi-known actor do you think they'll go for? Or is it just going to be, once again, just someone just out of the blue who has like maybe 5 TV credits, do you think will play Bond next?
I can only imagine it's going to be someone obscure. You know, at the time that they cast
5
Craig,
episodes of Doctor Who, and
yeah, something like that, something to the effect of that. You know, when they cast Daniel Craig, everybody was like, Daniel who? And he was blonde. Everybody had a
can't have a
problem
blonde
with
Bond.
He was the most obscure, arguably the most obscure selection of all the actors to play Bond. You know, and yet everybody was, for the most part, pleasantly surprised, and they were pleased with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're going to do that again. I don't see them getting like a marquee name. Like Tom Hardy's name has been tossed around.
They won't do it.
I don't foresee Tom Hardy wanting to commit.
He's too
to
old,
4 to
even
5
by that
pictures.
age.
Yeah, he's getting up there in age too. 4 to 5
And
pictures for the
he's
next
just-
15 years.
I know some people like him or hate him. I just am like, hey, you know, he's just gonna make a career playing villains and biography people.
And
so
wearing
that-
masks on his face. He's always wearing masks
There you
on his
go.
face.
Talking
Fantastic actor, Tom Hardy. Fantastic actor. But it's got to be somebody obscure. It's going to be a name that I've never heard of. That's going to be the next Bond.
What's funny is Craig years ago could have easily been similar to actors like Varanus, what's his name, Kevin McKidd on Rome. But yeah,
I'm not familiar with him.
That's all good. He's done more TV than he has movies, but I mean, Ian Glenn, you know, back when he was the villain in Tomb Raider, the original one, could have probably been one that also had Craig in it. But I mean, there's so many other people. There's other people who I'm surprised weren't Bond girls, and it's like, Jesus Christ, you guys missed out on so many opportunities. And then at the same time, I'm kind of afraid to play with that because I just figured they would have just fucked it up some way or just not made use of it. So it is what it is. All I know is the care they're doing with Bond, every other franchise could learn a little bit from. And I know some people just tune out because Bond has just been longer running, but it's like, no, really. Look at how they rebooted it. Most people would be, you know, I know some people who grew up not liking Bond, but they love the new movies. So that's how relevant he is. Whatever generation you're on, you like some version of Bond. I mean, you might even like just one particular movie that just stands out to you. So you can call yourself a fan. So,
yeah.
I mean,
and for the most part, you know, other than the Craig films, I mean, maybe Skyfall, you can watch them out of order, the Bond pictures.
Yes, this is true.
They don't rely on
they
the
don't
other,
follow
on the other films
much. Yeah.
Other than say 3 of the 4 Daniel Craig movies. It's interesting. Last year, I took it upon myself to marathon through the whole series from Dr. No all the way up.
Oh man,
to
that's
Spectre.
exhausting.
Look, I was grateful for it. I didn't do this like in just a week's time. I did this over say 2 months. Whenever I found an opportunity to sit and watch a movie, but
that's why I don't bother buying the Blu-ray set because I just know they're going to keep upgrading them.
Well, I bought the 50th anniversary one. That takes me through Spectre, and then it takes me through Quantum of Solace, excuse me, and then I bought Skyfall and Spectre individually. But here's you compare a marathon of the Bond pictures going in order, and then I had marathoned the Marvel movies, starting with Iron Man, going all the way up to Spider-Man Far From Home. I think that's the last Marvel movie now.
Correct.
And I told Miguel, my writing partner,
in crime,
after I finished midway through the Marvel marathon, I said, Mig, watching these movies one after the other in succession, it's kind of like your dad locked you under the sink with a pack of cigarettes and said, don't come out until you finish the whole pack. And he brought up a great point. He said, because what I realized with the Marvel movies is the blueprint is very identical from one to the next to the next to the next. And if it's not identical, it's working more like a commercial for the next upcoming picture. Whereas you look at the James Bond films,
they're their own things each time.
it's a travelogue. It's a really interesting travelogue through time as well as geographically.
Exactly. And to just call this just, people who are anti-action, which I've tried to disassociate myself from, because I find that they're contrarians or they're very picky. Like those who hate horror often don't know what that means. They just associate with one thing, and the same thing with action. So it's like, and these aren't just action adventure. These are also, like you say, travelogues. One viewing, you might be just studying all the details, like how it's shot and everything. The next time, you're going to be paying mainly attention to the plot, which might be cool or might be,
But
silly.
you're also looking at the scenery.
The scenery, you're going to concentrate on different other aspects.
These are locales that in my lifetime I'll never get an opportunity to visit.
Exactly.
And,
they're meant for multi-viewing.
Like in The Spy Who Loved Me, he's in Cairo. But From Russia with Love, he's in Russia, and he's in Turkey. So it's a fantastic travelogue, and it's a travel through time, because you're seeing how customs have changed, how history has changed. Simply through Bond movies. I mean, even the Indiana Jones movies can't tell you that, but the Bond movies can do that. And with the Marvel movies, you're seeing the same thing over and over again.
You mean in terms of just going to the different settings with Indiana Jones, or?
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, I watch those almost as much because they're just.
I love Indiana Jones. It's
they stay. Well, there's that, and they kind of jump around each location, so you never have enough time to look at every single one. You're just
And Spielberg doesn't want you to. Spielberg, it's all about Harrison Ford wearing the fedora. But with Bond, you'll see moments in the Bond films where before they get to the next scene, there's an overhead shot of the locale.
Before you even get the reading of the.
You get a read of the atmosphere. Like in Dr. No, it's Jamaica, so you're getting the island feel. In For Your Eyes Only, he's in the Swiss Alps. I'm not sure if it was filmed in the Swiss Alps, but it was meant to take place there. So, the whole ski chase footage, it gives you an overhead shot of all that. And I thought that was really interesting. Goldeneye goes to Cuba. At the time that Goldeneye came out, you couldn't travel to Cuba. So, they're really looking for some authentic locales in the Bond pictures, and it just makes it even more dynamic than just the adventure and the storylines that and the characters that you're entitled to see. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean,
and so the marathon to watch Bond, that was easy. It was pleasurable. It was really enjoyable, but then you compare it to the Marvel films, and I have great respect for the Marvel films. I love them. I'm there opening night. Anytime one of them are released, I get great pleasure out of those movies. I will never watch them in succession again like that, though. It was overload. It was like eating too much candy all at once or something. It was
exactly, and you get the heartburn or the sugar, just fucking with your stomach is like, I got to take some, now I got to take some Tums. It's affecting me.
And you look at a movie like Ant-Man, and good movie. Paul Rudd and Michael Douglas are great in it. I like it, but I'm like, this is the same exact plot as Iron Man for the most part. I mean, the sequence of events is the same exact thing. It's, they didn't even try to, make this different.
My problem with many franchises today. They just are, you take certain elements away, they're the same fucking movie. And so good or bad, I pissed off many people just with my takes on superhero films, to where I'm just like, again, I want more of the Men on the Mission, the other spy franchises. I'm done with capes. I got more out of Equalizer, Red, Now You See Me, even, those are my kind of franchises, because I wouldn't mind another Indiana Jones, but that's just it. They've been waiting fucking forever, and it's like, you know,
I don't think it's going to happen, Cam. I'm
I,
sorry.
oh yeah, I gave up my breath when Disney, you know, bought Lucasfilm. So it's like, okay.
Well, it's not so much that. It's just that this pandemic has put everything
Oh,
behind.
well, exactly. Yeah.
Harrison Ford is not getting any younger. You know,
Totally.
I know we're talking James Bond. We're getting off topic, but I'm afraid to say it. I don't think it's going to happen with Harrison Ford in the role again. I just don't.
Well, and that's just it too. I fear a reboot. They were talking about Chris Pratt, and I'm like, fuck no, don't.
Leave it alone. Leave it alone. It's one of those parts you can't recast. It's not interchangeable like James Bond.
Totally. They were even
because
talking.
Because Bond changes with the time. Bond has changed over 50 years.
Exactly. Any other show?
Yeah.
Any other show that's come back that they've ended up just, you know, I don't think they're going to shoot another season of. It's just not in the studio's interest, and it always comes down to budget. It's amazing how it is like they don't want to syndicate something, and yet they see the audience is there, and yet they keep taking these things off streaming. The same thing with the movies. It's like, you see the audience is there. Why won't you fucking do it?
Right.
Oh, we got to recast it. I'm like, okay, then just leave it alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry I asked. I'm sorry I was interested in that. You can't just convince an actor to, you know, to give him 20 million extra. I don't get it.
Well, I think we did a really good exploration of the Bond pictures.
So far, fun fact, another guy who should have probably been in a Bond film, Gary Daniels, had a fun kind of spy franchise called Queen's Messenger, and Christoph Waltz was the villain in one of the 2 installments. So,
Dude, send me a link to some of these things, because you're tossing titles out at me that, forgive me, I just am not familiar with.
It's all good. They're obscure. There's many people who have been in spy movies like Wesley Snipes and Dolph Lundgren who should have had their own spy franchise. And I mean, Brosnan kind of made an unofficial return to Bond when he did a book spy adaptation called The November Man. And they were talking about making that a franchise, and never happened because the studio got bought. And so, despite it making its money back. So I don't ever take anything for granted. I just say, you know, if they want to, they will, but most likely they won't. Either that, or they'll make the sequel you didn't want. And so now it's just an even more awkward position. They made money, but it's now the franchise is dead to you because they wrecked it with all the sequels. That's how I was with Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just like, so be careful what you ask for. And at the same time, just, if they're not going to make it, they're not going to make it. So
be satisfied with what you got. Be satisfied.
Exactly. And I mean, True Lies 2 would have been perfect years ago. Will they make it now? Definitely not, because James Cameron is in Avatarville. So
they'd have to remake the picture, and it would be. And who knows? It'll probably.
They've only remade it with every other spy comedy that's come out the last few years. The Spy Who Dumped Me, Night and Day, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So
yeah.
It's just like, so. I love Bond's impact, and yet I can understand if people, you know, don't like the current era and like other eras, or they love the newest era the most. It's just one of those, it's impossible to agree on, and yet everyone can agree they're a Bond fan to some extent. It's like,
but what's cool is there's something for everyone, you know.
Exactly. It's the machine that never stops feeding, and more or less you've re-seen some of the pictures a few different times to understand why you like or hate whatever installment. It is just one of those, if you are a film lover, if you are going to study film again and you want something that's not too pretentious, but you still might like these, even if you are an art house guy, it is one of those franchises. It's just they're expensively shot, and it shows on screen, and you know where the money's going, and for the most part it's often in the right direction. And those that were misfires, even then, you just want to even understand is like what was going on, because there's just always hysterical behind the scenes stories. So the film trivia guy gets a kick out of it. The film connoisseur who wants to like how movies are delivered and shot, they do have those quiet black and white moment worthy segments. So it makes sense why they shot some of them at the beginning in black and white. The video games are definitely worth checking out, especially because most of the Craig ones are standalone ones. Here's a funny one. The Quantum of Solace one is a combo of the movie and Casino Royale, but most of it has nothing to do with it. Most of it has to do with all the events leading up to it, and then they do in-game moments that are extensions of the both movies' storylines. And then
Really?
get this, at the end, in a cinematic, you end up killing Mr. White. So continuity error. Years before he kills himself in Spectre, you get to
We'll
shoot
forgive
him.
that. We'll forgive that.
It's all good. It's not like it fucking mattered. Not everyone was playing the game. So that's what's interesting is there was Bloodstone, and there was a few other games, and there was a game which was a montage of all the different eras of Bond, but you played as Craig in each of them, but you got to fight all the classic villains like Rick Ewens from Die Another Day and some of the more villains. So you even go as Craig in Outer Space in the Moonraker one. So it was levels. So it was interesting how they've embraced the video game franchise. They've had some other standalone ones where I used to play Nightfire all the time because of the hysterical, awesome multiplayer. There's some great one also in Everything or Nothing, but Nightfire was a lot of fun. I didn't mind the storyline. It's just had annoying shooting and villains from time to time. But yeah, Agent Under Fire was a popular one. And yeah, for both
I
those.
remember Agent Under Fire.
So there you go. They didn't use Brosnan's voice, but they used his likeness. And I was just glad to see that Bond became a successful video game franchise every few years. So you had that going, and I think that's what was cool about it, is just there was always something going on. There was always even a spin-off book happening in between the movies. So it was like
John Gardner was a famous author of the Bond novels.
Exactly. Yeah. And he had done other spy novels, sometimes for even other spy video games some of the guys had. And so it's just like Bond has always stayed consistent in other realms, and I think that's why they've gotten everyone's awareness. You don't just have to go on Wikipedia and summarize it all up. It's always there. And if you're not a fan of James Bond, you've at least liked other spy movies that inevitably, whether they're pro or anti-Bond, they've been influenced one way or another. They can't not be. Whether one of the production designers designed a similar car or a similar gadget, spies, or whether a character makes an off-color comment saying, "Oh, right, they're 00 whatever," it's just there. It's there. It's in our blood. It's in our DNA. My mother was never a fan of this series, but she'd be lying if she didn't watch at least some spy show or some of the actors in something else. So it's just.
Spy movies, they're a staple, just like the Western was.
Exactly. And Bond, in a way, kind of
comedy, it's
Bond is interesting because he's kind of become kind of a Western hero. There's been plenty of East meets West chapters. Even the Cold War stuff aside, he's always been kind of the British spy who speaks for the world.
Yeah, look at the Man with the Golden Gun. They do a draw duel at the end and everything. You even mentioned that it's kind of
High noon. Yeah.
In its final act of that.
Yeah. The 80s ones are A-Team, MacGyver episodes, but in one instance in Octopus, I'll never forget, he swings around and he makes a Tarzan noise.
Yeah.
The exploitation.
Some of those gags were a little bit much. One of the greatest car stunts in the entire series of the Bond films is in Man with the Golden Gun when he does the barrel roll.
The barrel roll, he does some
alley-oop sound effect over the stunt, and it kills the moment. It's like
it does kill the moment, and you understand.
Just re-edit the movie and just take that out. Do it now,
please.
But they won't do that. But the barrel roll, that's one of the greatest car stunts in all of films, not just James Bond.
Well, and you mentioned Live and Let Die constantly. I think that one even works even well by today's standards because there's a bigoted authority figure he has to work with, and he's just kind of like, "Oh, just shut up."
Yeah.
And
Live and Let Die is at the bottom of my list of the Bond films, but I still like it. I like all the Bond. I find something to like in all of them, even A View to a Kill. That's my least favorite. But,
View to a Kill. It has Walken. It wastes Dolph Lundgren in his first role. How do you do that? But
just happened to be on set.
I know he should have totally been, and it's so funny because one of the villains played by Gattuso in Tomorrow Never Dies looks so much like him. I'm like, he should have totally fought Pierce Brosnan in his prime.
Right.
But instead, he was being another goofy spy movies that premiered on HBO and video store shelves. But Live and Let Die. I mean, Bond ends up kind of avenging the Bond girl who is black, and he manages to do so without becoming a white savior. That's unheard of, even by today's standards. In every other movie, there's some outdatedness.
I don't know if Live and Let Die would be made today. At least.
No, it wouldn't. It's just so grim, and it's not
Yeah.
a positive portrayal of anyone with
The voodoo stuff, and the snake sacrificing and everything.
It's just too much. It's unintentionally misogynistic, I guess. It just feels like something you'd see in a B picture, but it's still a cool kind of black exploitation. It just shows you Bonds. He's a friend of all brothers.
Right.
So,
I mean, the only way a variant of Live and Let Die could be made is if Quentin Tarantino were to direct it.
Tarantino made it. It would have to be a one chapter of a Pirates of a Caribbean movie.
Tarantino's the only white director, and I don't mean to get political here, but he's the only white director who can drop the N-word liberally and go with the blaxploitation themes, and he gets praised for it. In someone else's hands, it's questioned. But Tarantino, he survives all that.
He survives it all because
somehow I'm not complaining about that. I just look at the perception.
Oh, there's that perception is everything. That's how movies get made, and it seems like he's the only one who's been able to make a lot of B movie elements in big budget blockbusters.
That's why, because he's the only one doing it. He was the only one.
He loves every kind of movie, so yeah, he makes a tribute to everything. Pirates of the Caribbean kind of has Indiana Jones type of tactics, but there's definitely some kind of voodoo type elements they could have they kind of get away with, but that's it. Like, if it's not just one segment of an otherwise always changing adventure movie, people bitch, people complain. So I think that's just it. Craig, I would like to think that Bonds coming from this fourth are ready to do something else, but I'm afraid they're going to kind of just stick with his same kind of style and just have a different actor playing him. I think realistically that's what they're going to do.
You're probably right. I mean,
they need to get different writers already.
You look at a character like Batman, and I know you're over the capes. You said that, but you look at the approach to the new Batman.
Oh well, it's a suspense picture.
They're harkening back still to the Christopher Nolan approach, the dark, brooding character.
Yeah,
and they're probably going to keep Bond as the dark, brooding character going forward still, because I don't think we're past that yet. We're still in the Jason.
So, well, what do you think? Do you think this does Nolan better than Nolan's Batman, or is it just one of the same?
Nolan's trilogy is one of my favorite franchises of all time.
Oh, good.
I like the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton films, but the Nolan pictures had more depth, and there was more character arc to the Bruce Wayne character and the Batman persona. It really looked like the arc of the character of Bruce Wayne began with Batman Begins, and it came to a satisfying conclusion at the end of the third picture, Dark Knight Rises. Whereas there wasn't much dimension to the Michael Keaton Batman. Keaton was fine in part. I thought he was great. I just didn't think there was enough dimension to how the character was written. And that's why I prefer the Nolan movies.
That's all good. There's pros and cons I have with Nolan's, but I mean, he did with by the time he gets, if you look at Memento and Inception, he's definitely the suspense master. And I hear Tenet is basically a big Bond-worthy spy movie.
It's very Bond inspired. I saw Tenet, and it's very Bond inspired. I didn't care for it by and large.
No, if anything, Jonathan Nolan seems to be a little more Nolan than his brother Chris.
Well, Chris does. I think now that I've seen Tenet, I think it's fair to say that Christopher Nolan does best when he's got Jonathan Nolan by his side.
Because you look at Person of Interest, that's total spy love letter.
That was an interesting series. It was a really interesting series. I think it lost its way eventually, but my wife and I were really into that series for the first.
I binged it all back to back, so I couldn't tell you. I just love the whole thing. But 5 years is where every show should just be. You should do the
Yeah,
Babylon 5 tactic.
that's where you got to give it up. I mean,
Don't-
Breaking Bad was smart enough to give it up after 5 years, but you know, they finished while it was still good. But yeah, the Christopher Nolans, they reign supreme for me in the Batman franchise, in the whole Batman motif, and you know, because of that, they're still
every blockbuster has to be that way.
that kind of Batman with Ben Affleck, and now with Robert Pattinson, it appears that way as well, based on that one trailer we got.
Now they're gonna get disconnected because now, you know, they're all going to be standalone, you know, with Joker and all that other stuff. So it's just like, I think a franchise, everyone should know whether that's fine if superheroes have to be their own thing. But yeah, if you're going to be like a spy or assassin franchise, you should definitely stand alone, but also still follow kind of the main kind of beloved character that you got to follow. So I don't know. It seems like everyone's kind of has to be like the other movie, or they have to lose their way, like you say, and just keep doing it to death. So I don't know. I really don't know. Who would you like to see write a James Bond movie?
Who would I like to see in a James Bond movie?
No. Write a Bond.
Write a James Bond film.
Because it seems like Robert Towne, longtime rewriter and screenwriter, probably.
God, he's so old now, Cam. I don't know if he still has the gravitas for it.
He's developing a Chinatown show, so I'm bringing.
Is he?
Yeah,
he's doing a Jake Giddey show. Interesting. Yeah, if he still has it, he'd be really interesting.
Because it seems like Die Hard was inspired by James Bond and then kind of ripped it off after a while. You know, Hans Gruber's a total Bond.
Yeah. Jonathan Nolan would be a fantastic James Bond writer. I think he would be really dynamic.
Yeah, they probably cast his dad in it.
Yeah, why not?
Like,
let him
just like Person of Interest. So there you go.
You know, Lawrence Kasdan's son. What's his name?
Jake Kasdan.
Jake Kasdan. He would be interesting. Contrary to popular opinion, I liked what he did with that Solo movie. I'm a diehard Star Wars fan. I mean, I've got my own Star Wars room.
Some of the early Star Wars writers seem like they could get it. There's plenty of other people who write great shows, so I know they could at least organize a feature film.
Yeah.
It's just the problem. I mean, Jack Ryan was kind of Paramount's answer to the James Bond franchise, but much like the superhero ones, they just kept trying to.
But I'll tell you what, you know, Jack Ryan 24, fantastic series, one of my favorites. You know, it had a couple of seasons where it just was a total failure, but not to the point where I ever wanted to give up on it. And they reinvented
give up after season 8, but
they reinvented that series without Kiefer Sutherland, and I thought they did quite well with it. And why not the makers of 24 taking a crack at James Bond? I would be intrigued by it. Most definitely.
Yeah, I think they could set aside their politics and they could make one. Yeah, I liked 24 without Kiefer, and yet everyone else seems to bash it. And it's like he's been on record as saying it was never my show. It was a suspense-driven show with an all-star cast, and for whatever reason, everyone likes to just gravitate towards just one of the protagonists. And it's like, they brought you Tony back, and you still bitch. So what do you want? They brought Prison Break back, and you bitched about that too. And I'm still waiting on season 6, which will probably never get made because it's not in Disney's interests. Even though they are separate from the Fox TV lot, they still approve everything. So it seems like everything's coming to a close, and you know, Bond will continue on, and they could definitely get some 24, Prison Break, or the Jack Ryan show guys to jump on board and flesh out a cool terrorist. Or
I would trust them. I would trust them with the Bond franchise, most definitely.
Yeah. So it's been great having you on here. I'll let you plug it yourself. Again.
So yeah, and you know, I really appreciate you inviting me to be on the podcast.
Anytime. This is a 2-parter, so I mean, I got other guys who are going to stop in the room.
This was great. This was great, Cam. It was a pleasure to meet you over.
Likewise.
Over the Zoom waves, let's say. if you don't mind, I'll just give a shameless plug to my website, M&M at the Movies. You can find us at spell out the word and, A-N-D, followed by another M, at themovies.com. That's where you can find reviews and podcast links, as well as some Zoom video conversations between my partner, Miguel Rodriguez, and myself, Marc Sanders.
Woo!
So I really appreciate this, man.
Anytime. So, man.
And I'll definitely catch you on the social media wave, and I look forward to maybe you coming on my podcast, or
oh, really?
I would love to come back and join you for another conversation on yours.
Invited, accepted. So yeah, sure.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.